Archie Manning, Arch's grandpa, said that he does not expect him to declare early.
For Arch Manning to just go 1 year in Texas and be done, he's got to win it all.
Arch Manning just made a huge decision that without a doubt changes the entire landscape of not only college football, but the NFL as well. And this not only is going to have ramifications on Arch Manning's career, but it changes the trajectory and the plan for multiple NFL teams. So for those of you guys that didn't hear, Arch Manning, the Arch Manning, is officially staying at Texas for 2026. His grandpa Archie just confirmed it to Texas Monthly, saying Arch isn't going to do that when asked about leaving early for the NFL. And let me tell you, this changes literally everything about next year's draft. So real quick before we get to the content, I apologize if my lighting is a little off. I'm currently in Sardinia in Italy, doing my best to get you the latest NFL news. So make sure you subscribe and turn on our notifications, because we're giving away copies of Madden 26 to our subscribers that turn on our notifications on this channel, and we're running the same exact giveaway on Instagram. If you follow and have our notifications on there, then you've entered for a chance to win copies of Madden 26. So here's the thing, the Manning family clearly doesn't do anything normal. While every other 5-star quarterback is trying to get into the league as fast as possible, Arch is out here following the family playbook. Both of his uncles, Peyton Manning and Eli Manning, stayed all 4 years in college. Peyton could have been the #1 overall pick in 1997, but he stayed at Tennessee. Eli spent 5 years at Ole Miss when everyone thought he'd leave early, and guess what? Both still went #1 overall and won multiple Super Bowls. And in Peyton Manning's case, it was certainly a bit of a spectacle.
I'm not going to try and make this a dramatic ordeal, but there are a few comments I'd like to make. I've asked dozens of people what they thought, and I've prayed a lot about it also. I knew I wanted to be 100% sure of my decision. I made up my mind, and I don't expect to ever look back. I'm going to stay at the University of Tennessee.
Now, Peyton would actually explain why he stayed for his senior year at Tennessee.
The reason I stayed for my senior year at Tennessee, going into that season, I was negative 180 yards rushing. I'm like, I'm going to get in the positive, and it never happened.
But here's where it gets crazy. Arch has only started 2 games in his entire college career. 2. And he's already the betting favorite at plus 200 odds to go first overall if he declares. The kid has thrown 90 career passes total. That's it. He's got a 67.8% completion percentage with 939 yards and 9 touchdowns, which sounds good until you realize that most of that came against Louisiana Monroe and Mississippi State. Now we need to talk about the big picture here, because Arch Manning staying in college football for an additional year could absolutely ruin his entire career. Historically, whenever a Manning has done this, it's worked out just fine, but I need to give you guys the cautionary tales as well, because we've seen this horror movie way too many times, and some of these names are going to be a blast from the past for you guys. Do you guys remember Jake Locker? Back in 2009, this dude was the guy. Every scout had him going top 3, maybe even first overall in the 2010 NFL draft. ESPN's Todd McShay had him as the #1 overall pick. The kid was gonna get paid, but Locker decided to stay at Washington for his senior year, which is a big mistake. Actually, it was a catastrophic mistake. His completion percentage dropped from 58.4% to 55.4%, and he got hurt, broken rib, quad injury, you name it. By the time the 2011 draft rolled around, he fell all the way to the 8th overall pick, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but back in that time, you weren't getting paid the same money that you get paid now when you entered the NFL draft. There wasn't a set rookie scale. And as a result, Sports Illustrated reported that he lost between $30 and $50 million by going back to school. Sam Bradford, who went first in 2010, got $50 million guaranteed. Jake Locker, on the other hand, got $12 million. That's a $38 million mistake. And it gets way worse. Locker's NFL career was a disaster. He started 30 games over 4 seasons, went 9-14, and retired at 26 years old because he didn't have the burning desire to play football anymore. Imagine losing $40 million and ruining your NFL career because you wanted 1 more year of college ball. But there's an even worse story here, and this one hits close to home for Arch because it happened at a similar program with similar expectations. Matt Barkley at USC was projected as a top 5 pick after his junior year in 2011, potentially going as high as #2 overall behind Andrew Luck. Barkley had thrown for 3,528 yards with 39 touchdowns and only 7 interceptions. He was money in the bank for a top 5 selection, but he wanted to chase the national championship and cement his legacy as one of the greatest quarterbacks in USC history. And what happened? USC went from preseason number 1 to 7-6. Barkley threw 15 interceptions, more than doubling his previous year's total. The offensive line fell apart after they lost Matt Khalil to the NFL, and in his final game, Barkley got absolutely destroyed by UCLA's Anthony Barr, separating his shoulder and ending his season. The fall from grace was spectacular. Barkley couldn't participate in the Senior Bowl or Combine because of the injury. Teams questioned his arm strength, and by draft day, he fell all the way to the 4th round, 98th overall. Analysts estimated this decision cost Barkley $42 million. The kid who was supposed to make $20+ million guaranteed and become a face of a franchise ended up with a 4-year, $5.3 million contract, and his NFL career was 11 different teams in 7 years, mostly as a backup. And speaking of USC quarterbacks who stay too long, we can't forget Matt Leinart. The dude won the Heisman Trophy, led USC to 2 national championships, and was projected as the number 1 overall pick in the 2005 NFL Draft. Matt Leinart had everything. He was playing in a pro-style system in USC, he had prototypical quarterback tools, but he decided to come back for his senior year primarily because it was pretty awesome to be the starting quarterback of USC back then. He said, "I want to finish what I started." The problem was he started something he couldn't finish. USC lost the national championship game to Texas on Vince Young's legendary performance, and Leinart's draft stock started sliding. He fell to 10th overall in 2006, costing him an estimated $7 to $10 million. In his NFL career, 4 seasons with Arizona, mostly behind Kurt Warner, before bouncing around the league as a backup. He never lived up to the hype and became more famous for partying in Hollywood than playing football. Then there's Colt McCoy at Texas. After his junior year in 2008, McCoy was projected as a 1st or 2nd round pick. He had thrown for 3,445 passing yards with 32 touchdowns and led Texas to the Big 12 championship. But McCoy wanted to win a national championship. Sound familiar? He came back for his senior year and Texas made it all the way to the BCS championship game against Alabama. But with 5 minutes left in the first quarter, McCoy got hit and suffered a pinched nerve in his throwing shoulder. He couldn't finish the game, Texas lost, and McCoy's draft stock plummeted. Teams questioned whether the injury would affect his long-term durability. He fell to the 3rd round, 85th overall, a massive drop from where he could have gone a year earlier. And here's what's scary about all these stories, they all sound exactly like what could happen to Arch. Elite quarterbacks at prestigious programs who were locks for the 1st round but decided to chase championships or cement their legacies. And every single one of them lost millions of dollars, and in most cases, their NFL careers never recovered. The common thread? Injuries, team disappointments, and the microscope getting bigger. When you're projected as the 1st overall pick, there's nowhere to go but down. And college football is unpredictable. One bad season, one injury, one team collapse, and suddenly you're not the golden boy anymore. But then there's Andrew Luck. Not every single quarterback gets burned. Andrew Luck is the perfect counterexample, and honestly, he's probably who the Manning family is thinking about, aside from their own family members. Luck was the consensus number 1 overall pick after his sophomore season at Stanford in 2010. Everyone knew it. The Panthers were literally called suck for Luck that season, but Luck stayed for his junior year, and you know what? He threw for 3,338 passing yards and 32 touchdowns with a 70.7% completion percentage. He led Stanford to an 11-2 record and a Fiesta Bowl win. He still went 1st overall to the Colts in 2012 and signed for $22 million guaranteed. Although one of the biggest what ifs in NFL history is what if Luck declared a year earlier and went to a program that, I don't know, decided to build him an offensive line, didn't trade for Trent Richardson, actually built a solid team around him, and didn't cause him to retire early? Well, that's a different topic for a different day. The difference is Luck stayed healthy. He kept playing at an elite level and had a great team around him. He also had academic goals. He wanted to finish his architectural design degree. The dude was playing 4D chess while everyone else was playing checkers. But here's something that nobody's talking about. Arch Manning doesn't need the NFL money right now. This kid has an NIL valuation of $6.6 million, making him the highest valued college athlete in the country. He just signed an extremely lucrative deal with Red Bull. EA Sports is paying him 50 to 60 grand just to be in their video game. His grandpa Archie actually had a rule: no NIL money until Arch became the starter. And Steve Sarkisian even confirmed this, saying his grandpa won't let him make any NIL money until he becomes a player and starts. Well, guess what? He's the starter now. So think about it. The NFL rookie minimum is $795,000. Even if Arch goes 1st overall, he's looking at maybe $37 to $41 million over 4 years. years. But if he's still making $6 million a year in college, the math starts to make sense. Plus, there's no state income tax in Texas versus wherever he gets drafted. And speaking of which, we didn't discuss probably the most captivating part of all of this. What NFL teams get screwed by Arch's decision? Let's talk about the teams that were already measuring the drapes for Arch Manning and how this changes everything for their 2026 plans. So we obviously have to include the legacy teams here, right? The New York Giants did just draft Jackson Dart from Ole Miss in the 2025 NFL draft, thinking that they had their guy. But if Arch Manning is sitting there at the top of the 2027 draft, that becomes too good to pass up. And we've seen teams do this before, whether it was the Carolina Panthers taking Cam Newton with the first overall pick in the 2010 NFL draft despite having drafted Jimmy Clausen with a second round pick the year prior, whether it was the Arizona Cardinals moving on from Josh Rosen a mere season later after selecting him in the first round of the 2019 NFL draft. Think about it, you're the Giants, you've got Dart developing for a year or two, but then the most hyped prospect since Andrew Luck falls into your lap. Do you stick with Dart or do you take the Manning name back to New York where Eli won 2 Super Bowls? That's a decision that's a no-brainer if the New York Giants find themselves there. But I want to talk about some more likely scenarios here, including one dream scenario for a particular team. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've been in quarterback purgatory for years now. They've got aging veterans and no clear succession plan. By 2027, they might be the most desperate team in the league for a franchise QB. Arch Manning in black and gold? That would sell a lot of terrible towels. Or what about the Indianapolis Colts? This is a huge one that nobody's talking about. Anthony Richardson was supposed to be the Colts franchise savior, but what if he's still inconsistent by 2027? What if he can't stay healthy? The Colts already have a storied history with Arch's uncle Peyton. He was there for 14 years, and if Anthony Richardson doesn't work out, Indianapolis becomes a prime landing spot for Arch in 2027. What about the Seattle Seahawks? They're betting on Sam Darnold in the short term, and they're hoping that Jalen Milroe develops into their long-term answer. But what if that experiment fails? What if Milroe doesn't fulfill his potential? Suddenly, the Seahawks are looking at 2027 as their chance to get a real franchise QB. The New Orleans Saints were supposed to be the primary contender for his services this year. Archie played 12 seasons in New Orleans. The Saints are where the Manning legacy began in the NFL. Having Arch finish what his grandfather started, that would be poetry. Plus, New Orleans desperately needs a quarterback of the future. The Las Vegas Raiders would certainly be a top contender for Arch's services. And if they're smart, they keep Geno Smith around as a veteran mentor, kind of like how Carson Palmer learned from John Kitna in Cincinnati during his rookie season. Geno's shown that he could still play, but he'll be 36 by 2027. Having him teach Arch the ropes for a year while Arch adjusts to the NFL, that's actually a genius strategy. And then we have Arch's worst nightmare, the Cleveland Browns. We all know the story with the Cleveland Browns. I don't need to bring up that jersey that one fan wore where it crosses out all of their quarterbacks' names. It seems like the Cleveland Browns are always in the market for a quarterback whose life that they can completely ruin. So I'm not writing them off if they get the #1 overall pick and want Arch. But probably Arch's dream scenario would be the LA Rams. For the very first time, the Los Angeles Rams have 2 first-round picks in 2026, and Matthew Stafford is playing at an elite level, but he recently sustained an injury. Who's to say that he's even able to make it to 2027? GM Les Snead is famous for his F them picks philosophy, but he's been stockpiling draft capital for a reason. Here's the thing, the Rams might actually benefit from Arch staying another year. Stafford can play through 2026, maybe even 2027, giving them time to really evaluate whether Arch is worth trading up for. They've traded up from the teens to the top 10 twice before, for Tavon Austin in 2013 and Jared Goff in 2016. With multiple first rounders over 2 years, they do have the ammo to move up for a player like Arch if he was to declare for the 2026 NFL draft, but the fact that they are finally pursuing draft capital over elite talent gives you an idea that they're trending more towards a rebuild. So if Arch really does stay until 2027, he's not just affecting 2026, he's completely reshaping the next 2 draft classes. And here's what the landscape might look like. Without the Manning name sucking up all the oxygen, the 2026 quarterback class actually has some solid options. LSU's Garrett Nussmeier put up 4,052 passing yards and 29 touchdowns this past season. Penn State's Drew Aller has the size that scouts love at 6'5" and a cannon for an arm. South Carolina's Lenoris Sellers is that dual threat quarterback everyone wants now. But here's the thing, none of these guys are lose your job if you don't draft him good, like Arch. They're more like solid starter if developed properly good. good. That's a huge difference when you're asking a coach to tank his way out of a job. Now, if Arch Manning headlines the 2027 class after 2 more years of development at Texas, then you're going to have a draft class that features Arch Manning and Patrick Mahomes, Dylan Raiola at Nebraska, who was the #1 recruit in his class. Maybe even some transfers who decided to develop longer, plus whatever high school phenoms emerge in the next couple of years. This could be the most quarterback-heavy draft since 2018, when 5 QBs went in the first round. And with Arch Manning at the top, teams are going to start tanking in 2026 just to position themselves for 2027. And behind the scene, this decision is already messing with team executives' heads. 5 NFL executives told The Athletic that they expect Arch to stay in school. If that's the consensus around the league, then it changes everything. Teams that might have tanked for Arch in 2026 are now looking at different strategies. Do they try to compete and build a complete team, then trade up for him in 2027? Do they take a quarterback in 2026 anyway and hope he develops? Or do they punt on the position entirely and wait? Without a generational talent at the top of the 2026 draft, we might see the most competitive NFL season in years. No team wants to be bad for no reason, but then 2026 becomes the new tank fest as teams position for 2027. But here's what nobody is really talking about. The pressure on Arch at Texas is about to get absolutely insane. ESPN has Texas ranked #2 in their preseason top 25, right behind Ohio State. The expectations are through the roof. Remember that Arch has only started in 2 games in his entire college career. 2! And now he's expected to lead Texas to a national championship with the eyes of every NFL scout watching his every move. That's pressure that would break most college kids. Every bat throw gets analyzed, every interception gets dissected, every loss gets blamed on him, even if it's the defense that gave up 40 points. The kid can't even lose his student ID without it becoming a story. And it's not like Texas has an easy schedule. They're in the SEC now, which means road trips to places like Auburn, Alabama, and Georgia. Those are environments where Heisman hopes go to die. Ask any quarterback who's tried to play in Death Valley or the Swamp. It's a different animal than the Big 12. Plus, Texas has to deal with the college football playoff expansion. More games, more pressure, more opportunities for things to go wrong. One bad game in the playoff and suddenly the narrative changes from generational talent to overrated Manning. But at the end of the day, every college quarterback thinks they can handle the pressure until they actually face it. Tim Tebow had a horrible 2009 season after winning the Heisman in 2007. Jamarcus Russell looked unstoppable at LSU, but was a complete bust in the NFL. College success doesn't always translate, and Arch has something that none of these guys had to deal with: social media. Every bad throw is going to become a TikTok meme within minutes. Every loss is going to have people questioning whether he's even worth a first-round pick. Don't forget that Arch isn't just representing himself, but he's also representing the Manning name. Peyton and Eli won Super Bowls. Archie was an NFL legend despite playing for terrible teams. What if Arch is the first Manning to flame out? That's generational pressure that most kids can't even comprehend. One bad season and suddenly he's not the next great Manning, he's the Manning who couldn't live up to the name. And all this speculation comes down to one game: Texas at Ohio State on August 30th. This is Arch's coming out party, his first real test as the full-time starter, on the road against the defending national champions. If Arch goes into Columbus and throws for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns in a Texas win, his draft stock explodes and maybe he reconsiders leaving early. The narrative becomes generational talent who can win big games. But if Ohio State's defense makes him look like what he is, a quarterback with 2 career starts, then staying in school looks genius. The narrative becomes that he just needs more development time. Ohio State has arguably the best defense in college football. They just won a national championship by shutting down elite offenses. Their defensive coordinator has been scheming against Manning-style offenses for years. This isn't Louisiana Monroe or Mississippi State. This is the big leagues, and Arch has never played in a game this big with this much pressure. If Texas wins that game convincingly with Arch playing lights out, suddenly every NFL executive is updating their draft boards. If they lose and Arch struggles, then teams start making their 2026 plans without him in mind. One game shouldn't determine a player's entire future, but in the social media age, sometimes it does. Ask Sam Darnold about the Rose Bowl. Ask Tua about the famous championship game against Clemson. Sometimes sometimes one performance defines how people see you forever. But let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about all this? Do you think Arch is making a mistake staying an extra year in college football? What would you do if you were in his position? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.